Have you ever had this experience in your edit suite before? You sit back, you put your feet up, and you watch your final cut. It's looking good. The story's working, the structure's working, and the shot flow is technically perfect. And yet, something doesn't quite feel right. It feels off in some way. Now, you're pretty sure it's not the pacing or the dialogue structure or the narrative logic. So what could it be? And then it hits you like a sledgehammer. It's the sound of the character's voice. The words are correct. What the character is saying makes sense. But the tone between sentences doesn't flow naturally like it would do in real life. The rise and fall of human speech, that subtle emotional melody, has been fractured. And on some deep psychological level, you can really feel it. Now, the result of that feeling is the worst thing that can happen in any edit suite. The illusion of reality, that suspension of disbelief, has been evaporated, and the whole sequence feels constructed. There's a name for this problem, and every pro editor encounters it sooner or later, and it's called intonation. If we get intonation wrong, we don't just damage a line of dialogue, we quietly tear open the believability of the entire scene. So in this episode, I'm going to show you what intonation is, why it's connected so deeply to emotional realism, and how editors shape dialogue so it feels continuous, human, and believable, no matter how many takes or interviews or fragments it's built from. Most editors are trained to think about dialogue in terms of content. Does the sentence make sense? Does it say the right thing? Does it advance the story? And that's great. That way of thinking is logical, but it's also incomplete. Human beings don't experience speech just as information. We also experience it as emotion carried by sound. When we're cutting unscripted material like interviews or actuality, we are almost always compressing reality. And there's a bunch of very good reasons that we do this. People repeat themselves, they hesitate, they go off on tangents, they change direction mid-thought, they warm up, they cool down, they contradict themselves. Unscripted is literally unscripted. These are real people saying whatever comes into their head. They're not actors reading off a script. No one speaks in perfectly constructed sound bites unless they have been heavily media trained. People like politicians, CEOs, or actors. So what we do as editors, and what we've always done, is we compress, we reorder, and we sculpt those fragments into something coherent and dramatic. If we didn't do that, every documentary or reality show would be like 50 hours long and utterly boring. But despite this, there's a danger in the very nature of this compression. If we only sculpt for meaning, we create dialogue that is logically correct, but not emotionally real. The audience may not consciously register what's going on, but their nervous system does. The moment vocal rhythm breaks, the story stops feeling like life and starts feeling like a constructed edit. That's the razor's edge we walk every single day as editors. So what actually is intonation? Let's define it. Well, intonation is the subtle up and down movement of pitch in human speech. Think of it as the musical contour of a voice as it moves through thought, emotion, and intention. You could almost say it's a person's vocal fingerprint. Everyone has their own melody when they speak. Tiny variations that signal things like confidence, doubt, sarcasm, authority, vulnerability, curiosity, or fear. When we listen to someone, we're not just hearing their words, we're decoding that melody to decide whether we believe them. And that decoding happens instantly and unconsciously, which means when we cut dialogue, we're not just assembling language, we're reconstructing the rhythm of human communication itself. And that's why intonation is absolutely sacred. It's not about rational logic of what a person says. It's not about syllables. It's not even about clarity. Those things are, all very important. But intonation is about emotional believability. The human ear evolved long before the written word, long before grammar or syntax. Our survival depended on detecting intention through sound. A subtle drop in someone's tone could signal danger. A rising pitch could mean uncertainty or curiosity. A trembling breath could mean fear, stress, or deception. Those reflexes never left us. Now, today, when a voice suddenly shifts pitch or emotional energy mid-paragraph, the limbic system, the emotional core of our brain, reacts immediately. It doesn't analyze, it doesn't reason, it feels. And what it feels is pretty basic. Something isn't quite right here. This is why you can't fix dialogue problems with transcripts. Syntax doesn't matter as much to the nervous system. Authenticity does. So when editors ignore vocal rhythm, they don't just make a technical mistake, they interrupt the viewer's unconscious trust in the speaker. That's the subconscious difference between dialogue that sounds logical and dialogue that feels real and authentic. So this is where editing stops being kind of like engineering and starts being more like music. To shape intonation, you have to stop thinking like a technician and start thinking like an orchestra conductor. So let's go through some points to memorize. Breath divides thought. Every inhale signals anticipation. Every exhale signals release. When you cut breaths purely to speed things up, like every social media video in existence, you amputate the natural rhythm of thinking. You flatten emotional phrasing into mechanical efficiency. And something subtle happens when you do that. The viewer stops breathing with the speaker. That shared rhythm, that empathy is broken. Sometimes the most powerful edit isn't a cut at all. It's leaving in the air where it belongs. Now, every answer from our unscripted characters carries an emotional temperature. So what do I mean by that? Well, one line might be cool and reflective, whereas another might be warm, vulnerable, or something like restrained anger. When you cut two mismatching temperatures together, the tonal polarity screams artificial, even if the words are logically correct. The audience feels what I would call an emotional jump cut. So we got to be very careful about bolting together mismatching emotions. These have to have appeared like they happened in real time. Throw away the transcripts. They're good for finding dialogue quickly, but they're not great for emotional dialogue construction. Always listen to the heat of the voice. Meaning can lie, but energy can't. Now, if we zoom into a waveform, we notice something very interesting. Speech isn't random. The peaks and valleys mirror things like thought patterns, emotional emphasis, hesitation, and release. When we cut against that phrasing, we collapse the musical structure of that particular voice. Our job isn't just to align syllables and create logic. It's to cut in time with the unique emotional phrasing of that character. Think about it like this. We are conducting a dialogue performance, not just assembling logical Lego blocks on the timeline. Here's a nice little trick. A 6 to 8 frame crossfade centered on a dialogue cut can quietly save you hours of tonal repair. That tiny overlap blends frequencies and masks imperceptible jumps in pitch or breath tone. Give it a try. It's a great little finessing trick. It won't work every time, but it often allows emotional continuity to survive aggressive interview compression. Here's an interesting thought. Sometimes our eyes lie, but our ears don't. So the next time you're replaying that constructed and compressed dialogue line that's been bolted together, close your eyes and listen to the line. If it sounds like one long continuous thought, it passes the intonation test. If it doesn't, it doesn't, regardless of how clean the picture looks. This single habit will elevate your dialogue editing more than any shortcut or plugin ever will. Every scene has an intonation trajectory. The voice starts somewhere and ends somewhere else. It could be calmer, angrier, wiser, resigned, resolved, whatever. When you rearrange dialogue, you must track that progression. If you scramble it up, the performance collapses, even if every sentence makes sense. Remember, dialogue editing is sculpture. You remove everything false until what remains is real. So, take all of these thoughts and techniques on intonation and give them a try next time you're crafting dialogue. When dialogue intonation is shaped correctly, something extraordinary happens. The viewer forgets they're watching a constructed scene. And that is the absolute gold standard that we aim for in editing. Total and utter belief in sequence reality. That's when people say that editing is the invisible art form. It's not just storytelling, it's a kind of hypnosis. And the craft of intonation, and it is a craft, is one of those foundational skills that allows us to hold that spell. If we break it with clashing or compressed breaths, tonal jumps, or emotional discontinuity, the trance dissolves instantly. Think about your favorite documentary or interview moment. What made it powerful wasn't just what was said, it was also how it sounded. Those moments aren't accidents, they're editorial decisions. So, let's bring this all together. When dialogue feels wrong, even though the words are right, it's almost never a story problem. It's not a pacing problem. It's not logic. It's not clarity. It's the emotional melody of the voice breaking under compression. When we cut purely for meaning, we fracture the natural rise and fall of human speech. And the moment that rhythm collapses, that spikes the audience's subconscious. And that is when belief quietly drains out of the scene. Okay, final thought for this episode. The next time you finish a dialogue assembly, turn off the picture, close your eyes and ask yourself, does this voice still sound like one continuous, natural rise and fall? Have we constructed something that sounds like it happened in real life, while at the same time getting rid of all of the errors that are natural to untrained people talking to camera? If it does, we've become invisible. If it doesn't, keep sculpting, because dialogue that sounds constructed isn't just technically wrong, it's emotionally wrong. And emotional authenticity is the real power of editing. Thank you for your kind attention, dear friend. My name's Paddy Bird, and this is Inside the Edit.